Hi, I'm here with Ernie the attorney. My name is William Schroeder. I'm a therapist in Austin, Texas, and I run a practice called Just Mind here. And today we're going to be talking about counseling and mindfulness in the working world. And first, I'll go ahead and I'll introduce Ernie and let him say a few words about himself.
Hey, Billy, thanks for having me. Well, gee, a few words about myself. I'm an attorney. I've lived in New Orleans most of my life. I lived in Panama briefly because my mother's Panamanian. And my dad met my mom in Panama. And my dad, for all of his life, or all of my life, was a psychoanalyst. And I think that's probably going to come up in the conversation here. He was a strict Freudian psychoanalyst. So, despite the fact that I know a lot about law, I also know a lot about the world of therapy and counseling and all that kind of stuff.
Awesome, Ernie. Well, thank you for introducing yourself. And I know Ernie because of my time back in New Orleans. I actually grew up in New Orleans. And so when I was there, I was lucky enough to meet Ernie. And even after all these years, because of Hurricane Katrina, I've been lucky enough to be able to keep in touch with Ernie as well. So anyway, Ernie, why don't you start a little bit about talking about how you feel mindfulness affects you in your everyday life, in your work, and yeah, I know a little bit of the background in terms of how you feel like maybe some of your understanding of mindfulness has shifted.
Okay. Well, so this is a topic I've been blogging about recently on my Ernie the Attorney blog. It's at ernietheattorney.net. And the reason I've been writing about it is because since late February of this year, I started meditating again. I've done it before, but I started again. And I was using an iPhone app, and it was sort of a guided meditation that was recommended to me. And I thought I'd try it for 10 days since that was sort of the challenge when you downloaded it. And I managed to keep it going for however many days it's been since then. So a lot of days consecutively just doing this meditation thing, which I had been doing. I've done meditation off and on before. So I've done it. I liked it, but I had trouble maintaining it. And I certainly didn't ever have a streak as long as this one. And what happened was, I'd say about 2 months after doing it regularly every morning for 10 minutes, then 15, then 20, um, I found that I just kind of started doing a lot of things that I had maybe tried to do before but wasn't successful at, like, for example, losing weight. So I had gained a lot of weight, and I was trying to be mindful about exercising and try to be mindful about what I ate, but that just wasn't really working. And so it's kind of by meditating and creating mindfulness that way, I accelerated or enabled things that I had been trying to do in other areas of my life, and without any intention really to do it, and without really any effort, obviously, because I wasn't even intending to do anything. All of a sudden, a lot of good things started happening. So I guess my main message about mindfulness is it's a surprisingly powerful thing, and you can experience this yourself. You can also read a lot of people talking about it, because since I've done this, I've been reading a lot of books, and I've been reading a lot of blog posts, and I've been listening to podcasts of people who talk about this. In some cases, I stumble across them again, weirdly, serendipitously, and everybody who is successful gives attention to the thing that they care about, right? And that's a form of mindfulness. If you want to make money, that's you can focus on that. If you want to be healthy, you can focus on that. But things don't happen predictably in a beneficial way unless you pay attention to them regularly. So that has been a huge revelation for me, that it works. In my own life, I see it working. And really all it requires is that you set aside some time each day to focus on that. And you can do that by meditating. You can do it in other ways, but that's the way that has worked for me. So that's the one I'm most familiar with.
So how did you feel like it tied into some of the stuff for weight loss for you? I mean, I hear you saying that you tried a number of other things. I'm curious in particular what you felt like that tied into, just because that's something that actually comes up pretty commonly with people. There's a book called The Gift of Our Compulsions, which talks about it in terms of kind of becoming more aware of all the different things in our sensory field. Like for instance, some people will become stressed. I see this commonly with people in professions like being a lawyer like yourself or an engineer or things like that, where they won't realize kind of the toll of that stress and how it affects them until they notice, like, say, a problem with weight. And then they'll notice that because of that stress, there's kind of compulsive eating that will happen or compulsive drinking, and ties into a lot of different things, like from a sensory perspective. Like people will sometimes, also undereat, but not just eating related stuff, over exercising, any kind of thing basically on the anxiety spectrum. And part of it is really trying to understand that piece and like look at kind of the stuff that our body's telling us. And I can say from even my own personal side that when I get stressed, I'll notice kind of a pattern within there, like say midweek. I can even feel kind of a desire to eat more and things like that comes from that piece. So I can relate to that. And so by incorporating mindfulness from my side, it's definitely helped me to kind of become aware of that, as well as aware of the different things that help provide balance. And it's something that I know I see a lot, and I'll go into this a little bit more in a second, but even in my work with people with cancer, in terms of kind of all of a sudden having a different relationship with their body and kind of sometimes even a hypervigilance that's there. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think, so I mean, the thing that so mindfulness is the goal, and then from mindfulness you get to other places. Mindfulness maybe is not the goal, I guess I didn't say that right. Mindfulness is a conduit through which you can get to a goal. So, and meditation is a way of practicing a skill that allows you to develop or to, increase your mindfulness. So most of us, walk around in the world, at least, the people I run into, because yes, my profession is stressful. If you get stressed out, you start focusing on yourself, and you become inward looking, and you have trouble kind of creating a zone where you can, some sort of buffer where you can kind of take stock of things. So you're kind of like always off balance if you're stressed. So if you practice mindfulness and you set that up in a way that's predictable and regular and sustained, which is the key to doing something like meditation every day, in the morning especially, and making sure you do it, whether it's 10 minutes or 15, it doesn't matter. But regularly every day you do something in the mornings before the stressfulness kicks in. Then what happens is you start to notice things that you otherwise wouldn't notice. And your phrase that you become aware of your body as a way of being more healthy about what you eat is exactly what happened, right? So when I tried to say quit drinking so many Diet Cokes or drinking Diet Cokes at all, I would sit there and say, well, I shouldn't drink Diet Cokes. And I'd go in the refrigerator and I'd have a Diet Coke, and I'd be stressed out, and then I'd eat something else unhealthy, and then there was this cycle. So I was off balance to begin with, and then I was always off balance, and I never recovered. Once I was mindful, if I took a drink of a Diet Coke, and this is basically what happened, I'd say, that didn't really taste good. That didn't it tasted okay for about 2 seconds, and then the next sip was just, a craving after the first sip, and really I didn't feel better. So I knew that. I was aware of that relation, I was aware of what it was doing to my body. And then I said, well, maybe I shouldn't drink that. Maybe I should drink more water. So I started drinking more water. I said, that's what my body seems to want. But, my body, I'm sure, had been telling me this for a long time, but I wasn't aware of it because I wasn't mindful. I was stressed out. Once I became more mindful, just things that were not right, I was aware of it. I'd say, oh, gee, I feel better when I exercise. I feel better when I walk. I feel better if I realize I'm about to enter a stressful situation where I might get angry. If I take a few breaths and realize you might get angry, you might not want to do that because that's not going to make you feel good. So you just start seeing patterns and you start getting ready for them, and you start adjusting your behavior. And it doesn't require a lot of thought because you're in a state of mind that just lets you see what to do. So it's kind of weird. It's hard for people, I think, to understand it unless you experience it. At least it was hard for me to understand it. But once you experience it, it's a very powerful thing. It's very subtle, and this is like one of my blog posts was about this, because I think in our world we have this tendency to equate powerful things with things that make loud noises, or which appear with a flash of light, and that they get a lot of attention. And so we tend to discount the power of things that are subtle, which is what mindfulness is. It's subtle. Like the first day you do it, you don't notice a big effect. There's no big explosion. The second day you do it, no big effect, no big explosion. But over time, like let's say 60 days, big effect, right? For me, huge effect. And then you start to notice things, and that's a huge, powerful thing. But it doesn't happen overnight, and it's not something that a lot of people who walk by, they don't go, "Oh my God, Ernie just changed from 1 minute to the other. Look at him." But people who saw me, who hadn't seen me in 2 months, were like, "Whoa, wow, you lost a lot of weight. Gee, you seem a lot more calm." So it's just, you have to build a practice, or you have to build on a skill that you develop over time, and you have to be willing to put in a small amount of time on a regular basis to get there. But that's the price of admission, and it's free. It's not a big deal. It's not that hard.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I don't know if you're noticing too, like the shirt that I'm wearing at Damn That Cancer, which there's actually a reason why I'm wearing this is just because a lot of the work that, not all of the work, but a part of the work that we do as a group practice is working with people that have been affected by cancer. And Damn That Cancer is it's a foundation that's here in Austin called the Flatwater Foundation. And with Damn That Cancer, they actually have a paddleboard racing event to be going from dam to dam in Austin. It's, I believe, about 21 miles that they do. And it was started by a guy whose dad was diagnosed with cancer, and he had actually done that as a piece of, as paddleboarding was something that helped him find peace. And it was something that helped him to be able to work through it. And he felt like part of that helped him kind of become more mindful and aware, and it gave him an outlet that was a positive outlet, and gave him a place to be able to process some of what was going on. And I see that a lot with clients, whether it be running, whether it's sometimes, their faith is an outlet that's like that. But part of it is slowing down and giving them that space to be able to be more present in their bodies and with their experience. And particularly with cancer, which my own dad was actually diagnosed with cancer almost exactly 2 years ago now. And he thankfully is a survivor. But it definitely makes me even more aware of kind of the mind-body link and the importance of mindfulness and work with people, of understanding how sometimes there can almost be like a body dysmorphic, not to get into too much psychobabble there, but a piece of where you can have a like hypervigilance about a body part. Let's say if you had cancer several times, worry about it coming back, or if you had cancer in a certain body part, worrying about certain pains that came from there, which potentially could be linked to that. And so part of it is kind of reintegrating that and reintegrating our experience and trying to figure out kind of a new baseline, and looking at the different things that maybe trigger that. A lot of times I'll find it with clients where, say, they're getting ready to go to MD Anderson again for a scan, and so all of a sudden they'll start having kind of like ghost symptoms of something happening. And so part of that, the work that I do with them, is trying to tune back into their body and trying to develop a better baseline, and looking for kind of having a better systemic scan that they do. And we'll use tools like Optimism Online, which is a really wonderful tool that is available for iOS, and as well as available for downloading, or for using rather, through your browser. And it allows you to track a lot of different things, because sometimes it's something really subtle. And certainly I think that mindfulness is a piece of that, but also looking at things like sometimes I'll have clients where they'll start to notice that they are sleeping less, and then they're worried it's stress and things like that. And then there's actually a lot of other little things that tie into that. And so it's something that can help us to be able to tune into a lot of those subtleties, which can be very important for our health. And Ernie, I definitely relate to what you're saying about mindfulness being helpful, and I by no means claim to be the super guru of this, but
nor do I.
I do think it's important in that it's a journey like any other, and just like I view it very much as similar to my website. I've been now through 6 generations of it. I started with a Google site that was really awful, and then went to like an iWebsite, and then slowly I proceeded through different WordPress designs. And I feel like in some ways there's a similarity even to that, in that there's kind of I view it as kind of there's, Billy 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, and just kind of being, mindful, tying into that piece of we're all in a state of evolution. There is no necessary endpoint. And part of it is giving ourselves that space to be able to kind of reflect of where we are and maybe where we want to go and slowing that piece down. And part of my job as a therapist, I feel like, is helping people with that. And I try and do it in a very warm, relatable way, just like I'm doing with you. I don't feel like I do anything necessarily differently. I don't put on my psychology outfit or whatever, and then all of a sudden just not say anything with people. I try and be very present with them. And anyway, so tuning it back to kind of mindfulness in the working world, I think a big part of this is tuning into yourself and looking at kind of what's there. That may be something as simple as, and I don't know if you've experienced this piece, Ernie, but of looking at, say, like when you say may feel hungry and trying to question that piece about being like, all right, is this hunger or is this stress, and what is the difference between the two, and is there overlap? And looking at things in terms of, like, tying into that book, The Gift of Our Compulsions, of am I numbing out from anything, and just trying to slow it down enough to be able to ask those questions. Just because for a lot of people that is kind of a common element that's there. Life starts getting so fast. There's so many different pressures, and there's so many different distractions, to be truthful. While technology, I think, is a wonderful thing, I also think that it's kind of become somewhat enveloping for all of us, which I'm totally at a party to that too. I have 10 million devices, but there's simple things that we can do, and I'm sure, Ernie, I'd love to hear more of what you do, but I know for myself, just something as simple as not having my phone or my iPad ever enter into my bedroom, just because I really want that to be a place that's kind of distraction-free, and so if I want to read or, just be with my wife or what have you, it gives me that space.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree, it's funny because I teach lawyers about using technology. I pay a lot of attention to technology. I like technology in terms of figuring out its usefulness. I mean, it's like some people like to do the New York Times crossword puzzle. I like to figure out technology. And then the byproduct is I know about it and I can teach lawyers how to use it efficiently. But I also am keenly aware, especially more recently, especially since I started, meditating. But even before that, I already started to have some practices where I don't check email all the time. On the weekends, I don't respond to email unless it's some kind of critical thing. I will check the email and say, oh yes, I got an email, but I don't go looking for it. Just if I happen to pick up my phone and have idle moment, I might see that. But I try to prevent myself from obsessing about checking email because it seems to be sort of a nervous tick that we all have in today's, ADD-driven information age world. So despite the fact that I pay a lot of attention to technology, I try to, keep it in its place. And it's funny because I've noticed that several friends of mine who are also adept at dealing with technology, but who are very successful, very efficient, very, not stressed out, but able to get a lot of things done. Those people also are very careful with how they use technology, and they do things like they carry a notepad to write notes, and that's their to-do list, or that's where they write things down that occur to them. And even though they're proficient at being paperless, and maybe some of them have written books on being paperless, they don't discard paper and avoid it because it's a simple tool that works well, that's not stress enabled and doesn't have hyperlinks lurking in there that you're going to accidentally click on or want to click on, and it's going to feed your mania to see what the latest thing is. So that goes back to the same thing. You have there's two ways, it seems to me, to live in this world, and this world is a very tricky world to live in because a lot of the mindfulness stuff that was was built into the old world. I mean, in the 1800s, if you lived on a farm, unless a comet flew out of the sky or an interesting cloud came by or something, you weren't going to be suddenly distracted. You did what you did, right? And I think in today's world, everything that's great is also a potential problem. The fact that we can so easily communicate with each other, which is great, is also means we're always looking to communicate with each other. And so you got kids sitting at dinner tables, texting their other friend across the table because that they are on their phones all the time. That's not good, right? And it's especially not good when adults who are trying to teach kids and to live a healthy life, just, go along with the flow, right? So I think it's really, really important in today's world, more than it's ever been, for people to sit down and go, okay, I live in a world which is really distracting, which is really set up to stress people out easily, and I need to do something about that. And so the what can you do about it? There's a lot of things you can do about it. Ernie's meditating, your friend rides a bike, you can, or paddles, canoe, whatever you do, but it's something you do where you're not connected to the internet, where you're allowed to kind of just, where thoughts come and go in your head, and they're not going to be disrupted by a ringing sound or chirping sound or somebody else's chirping or ringing sound, because that makes you feel good. Like, and that's another one that I didn't fully understand until I started meditating again. Like when I go for a walk in the park after I've meditated, it's usually an hour. I take the dog, and I like to spend an hour, and I do not bring my cell phone with me. And if every day I go, I'm like, I'm kind of busy. Maybe I should skip today. And no, you got to go. And then I go and I walk around. I have nothing to bother me, and I get like 2 or 3 great ideas every day that just pop in my head. Ideas that I can use to execute, to build things, to do things, to help people. Ideas that would not occur to me if I sat in my house and, was there among my distracting devices. It's predictable. Like every day this happens, and every day I have the same thought. Oh, I wonder if this is going to happen today, and every day it happens. So, it's hard to explain this to somebody unless they've experienced it. And how you experience it, you don't have to meditate. There can be a lot of things, but you have to consciously remove yourself for some period of time from the stream of mania that is our modern world, right? That's what you have to do. How you do it, you can do it through therapy, which is just basically another human being talking to you, helping you understand things, helping you free associate, whatever you want to do. Riding a bicycle, it's a lot of different things, but not with your cell phone next to you, not waiting for an email. You have to disconnect.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with that. And Ernie, what are do you have any other things that you do? I know, for instance, a best practice for me is that I don't have emails pop up on the screen of my phone. I don't even have my phone check emails. Mm-hmm. Unless I manually do it instead of having, and then things like Facebook. While I do have a Facebook, I don't allow it to have any notifications because I feel like that's something that helps me to at least have peace. And if I want to go and check that, then I can. Certainly there's the possibility that I may miss something on Facebook, but I'm kind of okay with that piece. And even I have one folder that's on my phone, which is called Time Suck. And part of the reason being, it's like, all right, if I go to this folder, I know everything that's in it is something that is a time suck. And, for me, that's definitely my guilty pleasures, seeing New Orleans Saints updates, like NOLA.com, some different things like that to be able to see kind of what's going on, with some of the things that I definitely care a lot about. And I know that when I go into that piece, that is my place. But I also recognize that for me, part of it is looking at, do I give myself enough space in my own life? And sometimes a piece of what does that, being a therapist is tricky because you're very sedentary. I go running in the morning with my dog. I'll take it in the evenings on walks. Even with clients, I do walk and talk sessions, which is something that's nice because it allows both of us to kind of go into a new environment. And granted, not on a day like today where it's I think it's supposed to get to 105 or something like that in Austin. Things can almost ignite here. But it's not when it gets to that point, but where, we can go outside and experience some new things and hopefully kind of look at kind of what comes up in people's environment. And actually in therapy, I find that to be somewhat interesting, noticing people that are very kind of hyper surroundings aware and trying to look at what do they do with that piece? Does that flow into their workplace, and looking at how much do they take on and do they communicate when they're overwhelmed? And I'm particularly sensitive to that piece myself, just because I know there was definitely a big period in my life where I wasn't tuning into kind of some of what my experience was telling me, like when my back would get tight, and looking at kind of all of what that might mean, whether it was due to work or relationship or whatever the trigger might be. Certainly, I'm sure as you experienced a part of that too after Hurricane Katrina, of kind of that affected all of us that went through it. Certainly, just because the PTSD and the stress associated with it had so many different manifestations, whether it be sleep or certainly like stress and tension that you can hold in your back. Because so many of us were trying to take on so much, and it was an interesting lesson for me, and I felt like I was glad that I was able to absorb that piece and learn from it and really digest it over a number of years, and still digesting it in ways of looking at how we can tune into the experience of what our body is telling us and what we may need that maybe we aren't giving ourselves. And as silly as that sounds, it's something that's important. And I feel like, just like what you were saying, we are definitely overwhelming ourselves with different inputs from technology. I mean, I read one report that was saying that in one day now people are digesting more and finding more information than they did even in a week to a month in the past. Just because we would all have those questions of, I wonder, what the story behind this is, but now we can instantly Google that. And so as a result, there's theories that that's affecting the neuroplasticity of their brain, and that's part of the reason why we are seeing kind of a shift in the way that some people are interacting with the world. The thought being maybe like some of the autism spectrum stuff is tied into that piece. And I don't. There's no research going one way or the other on it saying that this is definitely the case, but I certainly do think that that's true. We've got to think about kind of the gaps that we give ourselves in every day, whether it be mindful eating or what have you, and it's something that I'm kind of reminded of myself. I can get kind of so caught up in the churn of, say, seeing client after client and kind of doing things that I don't even give myself a space to really say, just sit and enjoy my meal and think about what are the flavors behind each thing that I'm having, and just slow it down, which is so important to do. And in the Mindful Schools program, they even get kids to go and do different little exercises, as simple as it may sound, of going and, say, chewing on a raisin and noticing how, when the raisin's first put in their mouth, how it tastes one way, and then slowly that flavor shifts, and being kind of mindful of that. In today's society, a lot of our experience isn't. And I think that part can create a lot of chaos for us.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that you asked, what do I do to kind of control the influx of the mayhem, and the answer is probably a lot of things that I now no longer think about because I take them for granted, and these are things that have been getting put into place for a long time. Like, so one of them is, I got really good at finding information because I was blogging, and so I became highly tuned to the idea that anything I wanted to know I could find out from Google. So, and then when you're mindful of that, you're also mindful of, like, you'll be in a conversation with somebody and they'll start arguing about some fact, and you'll say, well, we both have phones connected to the internet. Why don't one of us pick it up and do a Google search? And then, oh yeah, right, we can do a Google search. So, like, we live in a world where you can know anything you want to know, just about. I mean, you won't know the meaning of life, obviously, but you can know anything that's factual and determined and scientific pretty quickly, right? And so that's available to you, but yet we still go to the TV and turn on the TV news every night and sit there and, like, okay, like, tell me something new that happened. And at some point I just realized, like, wow, this is like stressing me out to watch the evening news. And I remember, I read Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Workweek, and a lot of what he said I wanted to believe. I didn't know if it was true. I don't know. There are a lot of things in there. He gets criticized a lot. But I'll say this. In that book, and I think it was in the book, he says something that I've thought about a lot. And he said, and his prescription for getting more work done, the title is somewhat ludicrous, but, you can get a lot of work done if you're careful about what you let in. And so he said, just don't let any information into your life that you don't need, right? And so his point is, like, information consumption, it takes time. And the one thing you can't manufacture extra of, you can have lots of extra money, you can have lots of extra, food. You can't have extra time. You're only allotted, 24 hours a day. And what you can do in that time depends on what you don't do. So he said, like, most information is negative, is outside your sphere of influence, or irrelevant to your goals. And he's absolutely right. That's exactly it. So if you say to yourself, I have a clear goal. My clear goal is to do this, okay? Then if I turn the TV on Am I going to see something that's going to help me with my goal? No. Am I going to see something negative? Yes, almost certainly, 95% of the time. Is it something that I can do anything about? No, probably not. So it's funny because just yesterday I was sitting in a jury pool. We got picked to go up to this case, and the judge and the attorneys were going to ask the people in the jury box, and I was one of them. A lot of questions to know if they were the right juror to be on this case. And it turns out that this case was apparently some prisoner, along with a bunch of other prisoners, had access to contraband like cell phones and drugs and even guns. And this guy that was being charged apparently took a selfie of himself, with his cell phone. And I gather from what the prosecutors were asking that they wanted to know if, what level of, anyway, they wanted to know like whether we could convict somebody even if we couldn't see, another picture of somebody then with the selfie or whatever. So anyway, they're talking about the selfie stuff, but they also had to ask. Now this occurs because there was this case on TV. It received a lot of press. How many of you have heard of this case? Had not heard of it. And I looked around. There were 50 people in the room, and I was the only one who hadn't heard about this. And then when he started asking me questions, he didn't believe that I didn't know about it. He says, you really haven't heard about it? And I said, no. He goes, well, you can Google it, or you can look on YouTube, and you'll see all about it. Almost like, I don't trust you. I said, okay. So when I came home, yeah, I Googled inmate, parish prison, selfies, or whatever, and I immediately saw it's been a big outrage, that people have been talking about it. Not me, because I can't do anything about it. And I don't feel my life is not the less, worthy because I don't know what's going on in an institution that not only can I do nothing about it, but apparently the people running it can't do anything about it. So, I'm glad that my life doesn't contain that information. But it's weird because I think a lot of people, if they heard that, they'd say, well, how do you know about important things that happen? Oh, you know how I know? Because important things, truly important things, a lot of people talk about them and you hear about them. So I know that Hamas and Israel are doing things, and if I want to learn about that, I can go online, and I do, and read people who are thoughtful and have meaningful things to say about it, and then I withdraw before my own ceasefire, ends, and I'm bombarded by stupid information, because that's mostly what we have out there. People arguing stupid things that'll never convince each other that the other one's right, and they just want to live in their own corner and believe what they believe and discount everything that the other person says because it's not what they believe already. So that's one area where I'm extremely careful about what I let into my life. I do not let information in that I'm not going to do something with that I can't do anything about. So I don't watch the local news anymore unless it's, a weather report.
And that's something that a lot of different research is definitely correlated with too, and that a lot of news these days definitely increases stress as opposed to decreases it. And I think it's something that definitely a lot of entertainment media is going to have to think about in terms of, instead of having things for shock value, of going and having things that have more health benefits. I certainly think that's part of the reason why people like watching Dr. Oz and things like that, just because of his, whether you agree with him or not, and I'm not meaning to say that I do, but it's more about kind of like positive, simple things that you can do with your health. And I feel like that's definitely a part of our society that people are having to look at, is what are we letting in? And I feel like certainly generationally that's something that's shifting too, because I look at it and I don't even actually have broadcast television. I have Netflix and an Apple TV and kind of do it that way, and YouTube a bit, but I notice even with the younger generations that part shifting, and that's something where it's certainly more YouTube driven and Reddit driven, things like that. And so I do think that I guess in some ways it's going to be important to figure out kind of what those limits look like. Recently I'd seen something called vitamin R, which is something that I had downloaded myself. Mac Heist had it on special, and it's something that's great for people that have difficulty trying to go and frame in and put their own boundaries for the time that they spend online. It's so easy to get lost in 50 million tabs and then stressing ourselves out because we have thing after thing that we're chasing. And that's something to think about, and it's something that I talk about in therapy too, is like putting together that blueprint so that way we can start really directing it instead of chasing it. And just because it's so easy to get off task, and vitamin R is something that really gets you to focus on kind of slices of different tasks and being able to slow it down. And it can even be simpler than that. What I talk about with people too, especially for kind of ADD related stuff, is going and trying to have their top three tasks that they're focusing on that day, and that's kind of their overall thing. And certainly there's a number of other different ways to be able to approach it. But I think it's just making sure that we don't overwhelm ourselves, because it's so easy in today's culture to be able to do that piece of where we feel just flooded with kind of everything that's in front of us. And also there's less and less boundaries. I don't know what it looks like for some other people, but with technology creeping in, it's just like I've seen some people where, say, they like Skype with their partner a chunk during the day, and that can be something that all of a sudden they don't have that space to kind of move through kind of their own stuff. If they're having a tough day or overwhelmed with something or whatever, they're like kind of hyper connected to their partners, and that's something that I feel like is really tricky. And that could also be a boss that that's constantly saying, hey, how's this coming, whether they're chatting us or like Skyping in or hangouting in, I guess. It can become very, very overwhelming really quick. So I do think that it's good to think about that in terms of boundaries. Like, what are we doing for ourselves in terms of that to create space, and from kind of others, as well as just having our own time. Like, if we say take lunch or something like that, really going and maybe having a sandwich and then maybe taking a walk and doing simple things like that. And that's part of, personally, I feel like the Europeans definitely have it better, in that they have more of a priority around quality of life, and they really guard against that. And it's interesting, even here in Austin, I know at the new Apple campus that they built here, which is, it's going to be over 1 million square feet. It's something that they've really incorporated into it. They put in definitely a really big wellness focus, so that way it has walking trails and meditation trails and gardens, and they put in huge trees, and they put in a whole big wellness center that has a pharmacy, doctors, nurses, a massage therapist for people to be able to use. And I think that stuff is important, and I wouldn't be surprised if in the future they don't also add therapy, just because ultimately this ties into positive psychology, and if you want people to do their best work and to be the most productive, we have to do those things that we're ensuring that they are in a good place. And so that means whole person health. It's not just part of them. So the research I've seen says that people work and when their mind is at positive as opposed to negative, neutral, or stressed, they're 30% more productive, and they have better retention, and they make less errors. So that's really important for companies to be able to think about as they really design their workplace strategies and workplace environments as they go forward. So,
right.
Anyway.
I was looking at my Kindle as you were talking to, because I wanted to pull up this this quote, because I was reading this book called The One Thing: The Surprisingly Simple Truth About, and I can't read the rest of the title, but it's an Amazon bestseller, and they're making the point kind of along the lines of what you're saying about, first of all, multitasking completely, it's a myth. Like, human beings cannot do two things that require focus. You can chew gum and ride your bicycle; those don't require focus. But two things that require frontal cortex kind of focus, you can't do two of those things at one time. One of them is going to suffer. And we live in a world where we think we need to be doing all these things because we're stressed, and we feel like we have, we get our to-do list out, and we look, and there's like 17 things on it, and we're not focusing on the key things. So again, you get up in the morning and you say, okay, I have a to-do list. It has 17 things on it. I'm clearly not going to do those 17 things today. Which 3 or 2 or 1 is so important that it's going to help my career, it's going to help me, it's going to help the project, the boss is really looking for it, because I can't do maybe more than 2 or 3 of those things a day. And the one that I probably don't want to do the most, that's the most challenging, is the one I should do first, because I have willpower to do that. And there's another study, willpower is a myth, the idea that some people have it and some people don't. That's not true. Everybody has it. You have a finite amount of it each day, and it gets used up. And so if you use it up on checking email and being distracted, then by the time you get to the thing that you need to do, you don't have the willpower you need, because that's a really challenging thing. So, it's just using these strategies and becoming aware of them, reading about them, reading about successful people who do them, because again, I've been astonished at you start reading these self-improvement books or self-help books, which I like reading because I like just kind of knowing what people who are successful prescribe. It's the same thing. They've been prescribing the same thing for years. Like Dale Carnegie, all that stuff, still true, always has been true, always will be true. The books about how you become wealthier and successful and make money have been around. Same concepts. Focus on the thing you need. Focus on it relentlessly. Don't take no for an answer. Learn how to get along with people. All these things, we've known these things. They haven't changed. You know why? Because we're dealing with human beings, and human psychology has not changed. So a lot of this really is strategic psychology. So to use it, you have to be aware of what it is.
Mhm.
What's the practical psychological principle that's at play here? And then how can it help me do my job better? How can it help me influence other people, if that's my job? But I think what happens to people is you get beat down so much, and you just don't know what the first step is. You're overwhelmed. You're like, and when I say, I'm not saying this theoretically. I have personal experience. I have felt these feelings. Like, I have been beat down. I have been overwhelmed. I have been stressed out. I have been depressed. I have been in a really bad place, and I know what that feels like. And I know that people telling me, "Hey, it's not that hard. Just do this," at that moment didn't seem like incredibly useful advice, but it was, because there's really nothing else you can do. Like, you can't rebuild the building that fell in one day. You have to do it one brick at a time. And so once you build it up, then you become aware, I need to protect this, and I need to make it stronger. And then you look around at other people and you see they have the same issue. It's not an Ernie Svensson unique problem that nobody else has had. Everybody has the problem of, gee, if I can think of a million excuses, and I've used them all, but now when I hear them, it's funny because they don't sound the same to me coming from somebody else now that I've overcome them. But when I had not overcome them, they were all valid excuses. They were perfectly rational reasons why I couldn't do what I needed to do. Like, you shouldn't check email more than twice a day, or whatever the number is. You shouldn't check it constantly. You tell people, as I frequently do, that one of the things that's going to help you with email isn't getting the new gizmo, but just not checking it all day long. Oh, well, I can't do that because my boss, there's a million excuses. Well, maybe have you tried telling your boss in a way that will persuade your boss that what you're doing is actually beneficial for them? Like, for example, if you were to say to your boss, and I mean, I'm just making these things up, um, you know, hey, that project you really need me to do, I'm going to work on that and do nothing else today, so I can't have any distractions, so I'm not going to be checking email today. You think your boss is going to say, no, I need you to check email. So there's always a way around it, but these excuses we use are refusals to acknowledge that there's a problem, or a vague recognition there's a problem, but then a refusal to acknowledge that it could be solved. You can't solve an email overload problem? I
Mhm.
mean, it's gotten that bad. But that's like, once you say that something's impossible, well, then it is. I mean, that's it. It's over. It is now officially impossible for you because you have declared it to be such. You've programmed your mind to believe that, or you've allowed the programming that exists there already to continue, and you'll never get anywhere. And so, but every athlete, look at you see all these people on TV who have, like I watched a special about Warren Sapp the other day. Dirt poor, grows up in Florida, goes on to be NFL, Hall of Fame guy. Worked his ass off his whole life. He believed he could do it. And he's one of the people I've heard say, whether you believe you can or whether you believe you can't, you're right.
Mhm. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, you could even use the Saints players as an example too. One of the things that I notice about them, and part of what seems to have given them so much success, is that just single focus on themselves. I mean, Ernie, I'm sure that you remember. I mean, not to get too off track on
Which we
Saints
will.
history.
We'll talk about the Saints, sure. Yeah, let's
I
go.
know, but I mean, like, with the Saints, you look at the history. I remember, like, when I was younger and lived in New Orleans, and I'd see a number of different players out and things like that, and it seemed like and sometimes it would even be before game day, and I was like, wow, this doesn't seem like a good thing that I'm seeing this guy out, and clearly he's going to be playing tomorrow. But now it seems they're so myopically focused on, all right, let's get through this next practice, this next game, and on themselves, and just really on their overall goal of trying to achieve the Super Bowl, and it seems like it starts with, Sean Payton goes down to Drew Brees and the rest of the team and cascades really well, and you see it. And also, the side of having some quality of life. I think Rob Ryan definitely, illustrates that piece pretty well, whether it be from his escapades at Miss Mays or what have you. But, having kind of that balance piece that's there and paying attention to it for all of us, just because we do have only so much bandwidth. And in some ways, like, I'll talk about it with people about thinking about it like that in terms of everything that we're taking on. Sometimes it's harder to think of it like in an easy conceptualization, and I'll think about it like some of the tasks that we may be taking on may be so big that it's kind of like having Netflix streaming on our phone the whole time. It would just be a total resource hog, and like our phone would be dead very quickly. So thinking about the different things that we have kind of running during the day, and looking at like what we can kind of, like kill, like what processes we can kill, if you will. Just because that's certainly a big part of achieving success, is being able to have that space where we kind of check in and look at everything that's running, and gaining that awareness of, like, I know when for me, some of my things are that, like, if my inner back is tight, it's telling me that I've got too much going on one way or another, and so I need to tune into that piece, or I may bite my nails a little bit. As silly as that sounds, that definitely gives me an indication of what's there. And then it's, what do I do with that data? Every year around the time that I have to, April 15th, the IRS, being self-employed, that always makes me a little anxious. I know that generally that's going to be a time where I am going to feel more of those symptoms. And so part of the challenge is every year looking at, like, what can I do better? What can I do differently to try and go and remove this? It may be something as simple as digitizing all of my receipts as I have them, and having that go be a file that's shared with my bookkeeper that takes care of all of that. So that way at the end of the year it's not a stressful event that I'm going through. And as silly as that sounds, all of that stuff kind of integrates, and I feel like becoming kind of more mindful, it is like exercising a muscle. It's pretty weak at first, but slowly we exercise that muscle and it gets stronger. And then I view it kind of, another analogy that I'll use is kind of like, I went through a firehouse once, and they were talking about how fires got started, and they were talking about having fire retardant surfaces within different areas, and that's something that's important for containment, as well as not having anything that's fuel around, and that can be so many different things that are considered fuel. And that's something that I think all of us need to look at, is distractions can be very much the same way. And that it kind of starts this, like, fire of disruption, if you will, within our lives. And so we have to think about kind of like, where is that, oily rag in the gas can in our lives, of where we can go and easily get distracted, and that there's so many different things like that for us. And what are the different things that we have as kind of our firewalls to be able to prevent those things from spreading from one area to another? And so that's an important thing as we kind of go forward. As like, I know that you have kids, and that's certainly a big stressor for a lot of people. They love their kids, but there's definitely so many of us are kind of running lives at this Olympic pace now, where we are working so hard to try and go and have our own maximum quality of lives, to be able to extend it to our children. And that's a really huge challenge in this society, because we're just trying to do so much. Right. And I think it definitely has repercussions on all of us, whether it be, like, certainly I think that it manifests itself in physical health, but also in mental health. And Ernie, I don't know about you, one little thing that I saw after Hurricane Katrina was I started getting, like, these gray hairs all in here, and they started doing this Oregon Trail around my head real fast. And I knew that it was related to, for me, there was definitely a correlation to the stress that I felt, because I didn't have that problem. You look at presidents, and that's something that you certainly see in their time, of how fast they gray.
Right. Well, you said like, some people have so much to do, and I think the thing is, so I'm almost getting stressed out listening to all this, because it reminds me of the overwhelming part. But the thing that I bring, I always bring my attention back to, and I'm going to use my to-do list from today as an example, because we talked about this. You can, and you talk, any person who's successful, David Allen, getting things done, great system for learning how to keep track of stuff. A lot of people go, oh my God, that's a huge project. I can't do it. It's because it's a project. If it has more than one step, it's not a task, it's a project. And so you have to define things for what they are and become very clear about the way things are and what you can do and how you feel. And so being very clear and moving through in a very stepwise fashion is the key, right? So just take the simple act of like just saying to yourself, okay, I have to-do list. Well, everybody goes, oh, I know how to do a to-do list. Okay, I said that too, and I didn't know how to do a to-do list. I knew how to do one that's going to produce stress. I didn't know how to do one that was going to produce action and relieve stress. And the way you do the one that produces action is you have some place where you put everything that pops into your head because you're going to be stressed out if you're thinking about it. And that's David Allen's recipe is get it out of your head. So you write it down somewhere. Everything you got to do. It can be messy, and I have a notebook for that. But then at the beginning of the day, I look at that messy notebook, and then I take my little thing that only holds about 6 or 7 tasks. And I know I'm not going to get to all these, but that's not important. It's important to me that I know that if I run out of things to do, I can have other things. So I put the top ones at the top, but the ones I start at the bottom. So like unless I know it's super important, I just start at the bottom. And usually they aren't important. So the first one I had, this is a classic example of something I used to define, and I'd say, oh, I need to write an email to that person who asked for volunteers to talk about how great meditation is because they're writing a book, and I really want to help that person write the book, so I got to send him an email, and I know I have the email somewhere, and I have something else, and I got to figure out what I'm going to send him, and so all of a sudden I start thinking like, well, what am I going to say? What is she looking for? Oh, you know what? I don't know what the task is. So I wrote, what's the next step to help blah, 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 blah. All right, so if I get to this task today, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to say, what's the next step? And I'll sit there, and this is a fun task, because I can sit there, I can be walking, I can be doing anything and think, oh, I guess I need to figure out what they want from me. Okay, so I got to open up the email and read it. Can I do that? Yes. Can I do that in 2 minutes? You betcha. If I do it in 2 minutes, I might go, oh, well, I'll just knock out the email. But if I wrote, send email back down, that would stress me out.
Yeah.
What is the next step? That's not going to stress me out. That's sitting there right there. I could totally do that in about 30 seconds if I get the time to do it after I get to the first 2 challenging things I have to do, which I haven't done yet.
And Ernie, I definitely agree with what you're saying. It is kind of slowing it down, and I often talk about kind of a balance beam analogy of life, and that we have to really just focus on just putting one foot in kind of front of the other. And a lot of times I'll end session with kind of the thought of, all right, what's one thing that you can do between this session and the next session to kind of work towards that goal? I'm trying to slow it down just because there is so much chaos that's kind of floating around all of us. Like when I was a kid, literally I did gymnastics and I did balance beam, and one of the things that they would do is they would have kind of kids on either side of the balance beam that would kind of yell at you, and they were supposedly the lava trying to make us be distracted and fall off. And I think in today's world, that's a very true analogy, in that we all have those different things that are kind of the chaos around us trying to distract us and make us fall off. And it is part of the challenge of just really slowing it down and putting one foot in front of the other to try and slowly move through this. Just because if we get too far ahead, we easily...
It's slowing it down, but it's also the component of what you get from slowing it down is the ability to stay on your clear path. Mm-hmm. So it's clarity that is the key. Like that was the thing. Like, in fact, I've said this to, like if I was ever on a game show and they said, if we take away a contestant show where I'm wearing a big ribbon trying to win some prize, and they say, what's the one thing, if a genie popped out of a bottle, or if you lost your mind and you wanted to recover one thing to start over, I know exactly what it would be. Clarity. Like, clear sense of what is true right now, what is actually happening, what I'm actually feeling, what I actually need to do next, how likely I would be able to do it if I define it in a ridiculous way versus a simple, what's the next step way. Clarity is what people who are successful and aren't stressed out have. Clarity is what tells you the next thing you need to do. Weirdly, in a crisis, like a true crisis where a fire is raging and you're about to get swallowed up, you have clarity. When you're about to die, you probably have great clarity because all the little stupid stuff goes away. So why is it that you could acquire clarity when a catastrophe happens and in a moment's notice, all of a sudden you know what to do, but living your daily life, that somehow is escaping you? And it's because you allow it to, right? That's the reason. And so building a system that prevents you from being cut off from something that apparently occurs quite naturally in the right conditions, that's the key. And that's what, to me, the meditation thing, and the one I use is called Headspace. And he ends every session with, now think about what is the next thing you're going to do, and keep thinking about that throughout the day. Wow, that's the whole ball game. Like, that's it. And what happens when I check in with myself about 3 o'clock today, as I do every day? What is going to be missing? Clarity. I mean, of the level I had, the intensity I had at that moment, because throughout the day I start thinking about things in my head. I start having internal fantasies, and then by the end of the day, my willpower is exhausted. I have accomplished however many of those things I've accomplished, and now I want to eat a cheeseburger. I mean, that's everybody's life. But
Yeah.
I know that tomorrow when I get up, I'm going to rebuild that clarity, because I am not getting anything done unless I'm in control of my life, and that's the only thing I can do, is have the discipline to establish a habit upon which I can have clarity. That's the whole thing for me, and I think that's what everything that people seek that helps them improve or helps them get out of a situation they don't like. That's really what it is. It's, you need something that you can build on, and you take one step, and the one step, it depends on where you are, I guess, but the one step, if you're in deep trouble, would be to get therapy, find somebody you trust and that you can talk to, but try to acquire clarity as quickly as you can, because clarity is not certainty either, by the way. Clarity doesn't mean that I wake up every day and I go, oh, I know exactly what I'm going to be doing for the next 7 days. I know exactly what my life is going to be like. I know exactly what I should do when this moral dilemma appears. I don't know those things, right? But I'm clear that I don't know those things. And I'm clear that if I think about it and allow myself the space to pay attention to that I will, or at least I'll know as best I can. But what I won't do, what won't help me, is walking through life thinking, oh yeah, I know exactly what I need to do, except here's my list, I'll try to knock off as many as I can. Oh look, there's somebody on TV that I haven't seen before. Oh look, there's another thing over here. Like, I get nothing done, and I'm lost. And then I haven't built up anything that I can use to make my life better. I'm not healthier. That's a quicksand to me. But if I get up every morning and I go, okay, today I need to be healthy. So what do I need to do? I need exercise. I need mental exercise. I need a plan for the day. And then I'll accept the fact that the world's uncertain, and I'll deal with that as best I can. But I don't know. Like, that's everything I know. And if they erase my brain, I want them to put that back in.
Well, Ernie, I like that, and I totally I agree with what you're saying. And there's definitely a lot of, like, I don't know if you've seen the documentary Happy that's on Netflix too, and it definitely reinforces that piece of a lot of happiness comes from simplicity and being able to break things down. And like, it actually had Southern Louisiana as one of the happiest places in the world, just because part of that, it's people's connection to one another, it's people's simplicity, and that definitely goes a long way with quality of life. And so it is a process of trying to, as complex as our lives can get, of trying to slow things down and try and make them a little bit more simple so they don't really overwhelm us. And I think that's part of our challenge every day, is to try and get to that place of clarity. And by kind of, sometimes I'll recommend for people to go and have meditation at the beginning, and or just something like journaling at the end of the day, to try and go and offload some of what's there, so it doesn't keep running. It's like processes in our background that can affect our sleep, and paying attention to that stuff of what it is that we're kind of carrying around with us, because very easily so much gets caught on us at the end of the day, and we all of a sudden aren't mindful of any of what our experience is. So anyway.
Yeah, I agree.
Ernie, I thank you so much for taking the time to be able to talk with me today, and I hope
Sure.
that this conversation is is helpful. I know I've learned a lot from you too. I always do. That's part of the reason why I've always enjoyed being friends with you. So I feel like there's something new that I absorb every time, and so I especially appreciate that in this conversation with you as well.
Same here, and I'm gonna go download that Vitamin R app and check it out.
Yeah, cool, man.
All
Well,
right.
look, I look forward to catching up with you soon. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a good day.
Thanks for having me, Billy. Good talking to you.
Okay, so that's Ernie the Attorney. You can check him out at Paperless Chase, PDF for Lawyers, or ErnieTheAttorney.net. I'm William Schroeder with JustMind.org. You can check out our website where we have counseling and coaching services, as well as a blog, and we actually have some upcoming series. We have an upcoming series rather on mindfulness. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed our conversation today, and we look forward to seeing you in the future.